My name is Brother Ray Ray. Oh, we got it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hotel family, my name is Brother Ray Ray. This is 129. I want to welcome everyone to the Africans Helping Africans lecture series. Mike is to the third in honor of Dr. William Mack Jr., Amos Wilson, Louis Ray Rivera, Gil Noble, Chancellor Williams, El Haj Malik El Shabazz, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and all the historians who brave up fame and fortune. Big Cadillacs, dinners, good life, big houses, mansions in Georgia, all kind of trinkets.
Yeah, white women, throw that in.
Whatever they pleasure. Because they chose to tell the truth about history. They gave that up. They could have went that route. I saw one time in Amos's office, he had a heater on 138th Street, African World Info Systems. He had a heater, a small grill oven, electric. 138th and 3rd Avenue, used to sit there for hours, eating up a turkey wing
Turkey wings?
to eat. In honor of these giants, we have the Amos Collection, Blueprint for Black Power, African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order, the developmental psychology of the black child, awakening the natural genius of black children, black-on black violence, revealing the unspeakable Bible verses, the truth about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Earl Ponder passed away before the book, and Sababa had a whole bunch of books, cases, so I took a few of them. All the proceeds go in. We got Louis Ray Rivera, Jazz in Jail. All the money that's sold from those books goes right back into the coffers of African Helping Africans, so we can pay the rent. Try to give the speaker a few dollars, have some refreshments, and keep information going, information highway. If anybody wasn't here for New Year's, you missed an unbelievable lecture, roundtable discussion. On YouTube, Mackey's Lectures number 1, Mackey's Lectures number 2, and Mackey's Lectures number 3 are downloaded on YouTube. And the last 2 is Africans Helping Africans 1 and African Helping Africans 2. Mike Graves and Dr. Arthur Lewis. All of the downloads are going to be under Africans Helping Africans in the future. We also have Dr. Lewis, 1218, Arthur Lewis and Mike Graves, 911, and the round table that we did on New Year's, right here. If you want. On Tuesdays at 5 o'clock, Manhattan Neighborhood Network.org. Our good brother Mike Graves, Noel Leader, Julian Harper, Father Lucas. Excellent. They was fierce this past Tuesday. Even had Dr. J on there the Tuesday before that and the Irritated Gene. All you got to do is go on YouTube and everything comes up. All the other programs. Saturdays, 10:30. While everybody is shaking and baking.
I don't do that anymore.
And everybody is moving
I
and
don't do that anymore.
You have Blog Talk Radio with Sister Empress G. I missed last week because of some problems. But 10:30 and they roll. You go into Blog Talk, type in Empress Chief, go down, and 10:30 it comes in, and the number comes up, and you can join into the conversation. Unbelievable. This is why we want to provide information, because this European is not stopping with his chicanery. They are working 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and 7 days a week. You can run, but you can't hide. The Osiris Papers I started reading in commemoration of Francis Cresswell is an excellent book. I'm just starting it.
Yeah, I read that book already.
Also, it just came out. You didn't read this one. It just came out 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah? Don't you have another one?
It's from a whole bunch of other people. It's from Dr. Marabing, and Harry Allen, Anthony Browder, Chuck D. All these people, Wayne Nobles, has put their opinion on. It's excellent. So this just came out. This is
Oh, must be another
in
one.
honor of her.
Okay, I read the other one. Okay.
Now, funny thing, we're coming into Black History Month. And, you know, Doc Lewis always says get these, you know, these little giveaways that you have on the train. And I'm looking at all the stuff that's happening with the Jews and all these so-called incidents. And now they got the FBI and all kind of Cuomo going over there. From the News AM Metro, free. The House of Representatives passed this week the Never Again Educational Act, sponsored by Congresswoman Caroline B. Mahoney of New York City, which funds Holocaust educational programs throughout the city, throughout the country. The bill, which now heads to the Senate, was passed by 393 to 5 margin on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, with this year being the 75th anniversary. The House bill provides $10 million in funds over 5 years. We are committing ourselves to the promise of never again, 75th anniversary. How many of our black elected officials voted for this? And we, as African people, the horrors of slavery, the books are there, and we can't get a goddamn quarter. Just like Brother Mike says, who shall cry for us? During the roundtable discussion, Brother Harold mentioned the book, The Guide to Black Folks. The New York draft riots, the thirst for black blood was no less desire of the white New Yorkers than that of the white Southern crackers. The threat of the Civil War fanned every race tendency in white New Yorkers when in 1863, Uncle Sam came to the state looking to fill a Union Army recruitment quota of about 30,000 white males, violently objected. The Army made it easy for the rich to escape service. They simply paid $300 to dodge enlistment, which outraged poor whites. And they went on a rampage. The contemptuous, mostly Irish immigrants were too cowardly to confront Uncle Sam or the white merchant class in whose entrance the war was really waged. Instead, they scapegoated a vulnerable black exhibited itself in a vicious way. The carnival of violence for 3 days began on July 11, 1863. 70,000 treasonous New Yorkers sacked, burned, massacred blacks with wild abandon. 2,000 policemen had no effect, and reports prove that they sometimes joined in the slaughter.
Wow.
Who will cry for us? William Maley and Matthew Zerwick alternately beat and kicked and stoned James Costello, a black man. They trampled his body and hung him. Then they dragged him to the mud hole, then immersed him in water and emptied a barrel of ashes over his head. George Glass yanked, crippled black coachman Abraham Franklin and his sister Henrietta from their rooms, beat the girl, dragged Franklin through the streets, hung him from a lamppost. The military arrived and cut Franklin's bodies, but when the soldiers departed, the corpse was hoisted up again with cheers from Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Patrick Butler then dragged the body through the streets by his genitals and hung him again. William Derrickson, a black laborer, Derrickson's son escaped, but his son Alfred was pulled out into the street, stripped and beaten. A fire started under a lamppost, and Alfred would have been burned to death were it not for the intercession of area residents who chased the lynchers away. Black workman Charles Jackson was beaten and nearly drowned. Jeremiah Robinson, a black man trying to escape to Brooklyn, was beaten senseless and thrown in the East River. Black sailor William Williams was assaulted as he walked ashore at Upper West Side. As he was forced to prostrate, each gang member joined him, smashed his body with a cobblestone, and finally planted a knife in his chest. Whites invaded a house on East 27th Street, killed H.W. Nichols, a young black man who was trying to defend his elderly mother. Unsatisfied, they snatched a newborn black baby and hurled the child out the window. Several hundred whites seized a helpless black man, beat him into insensibility, hanged him from a tree, hacked his body, and finally built a fire. 3 blacks were lynched on the site of the present Pennsylvania Railroad station, while a gang of beastie women milled about the dangling bodies of black men, gashing their flesh with knives, while more than 5,000 cheered on. On Staten Island, 50 whites beat a lame black man who was unable to follow his friends into the woods. Just a few. The attack on the College Orphanage Asylum, 42nd Street and 5th Avenue. The home of the last resort, 250 black children. The orphanage was a large institutional building on 5th Avenue between 43rd and 44th Street. When 3,000 marauders set upon the building, there seemed to be little doubt that most of the children would have been butchered alive if they had not been laid out as rear entrance. In the panic, 20 children were cut off from the main group of orphans, and on those unfortunate, the Caucasians quenched their appetite for blood and melanin. One little black girl who had been lost in the confusion was discovered trembling under a bed. She was pulled out and beaten to death. 10-year-old orphan Jane Barry was killed when a bureau dropped from a window of an upper landing and smashed her head. Mike said it, who will cry for us? This is just a few of the things in the book that Harold mentioned. So, the hidden history of New York.
Thigpen is the author.
So this is what I'm talking about. Who will cry for us? In the meantime, $100 million and whatever else they could get, and not a quarter for us for our history. That's why you honor Dr. Mackey, Dr. Rivera, Dr. Amos. You give praise for Dr. Lewis coming here. You give praise for Mike Grave coming here. You give praise for the people coming here. Trust, because they sacrifice. 393 voted for. Without further ado, we have Brother Mike Graves, co-founding member of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement. He's going to speak from 8 o'clock, going around to 9, maybe 10 after 9. We have refreshments in the other room, men's and women's bathroom. The men's is the first, the women's is the second. We have refreshments from 10 after 9 and maybe 20 after 9. We're going to come back with questions and answers. If you have too many questions and answers, Brother Mike is going to continue on to about 4 after 10. Once again, information in the lecture will be downloaded. The information highway so we can arm ourselves. So if you think the atmosphere is not there, you can see the atmosphere there because it happened before and nobody did nothing about it. So without further ado, the topic is
Black nationalism.
Black nationalism. Give Brother Mike
Thank you, and certainly thank those who braved the weather to come out here in close to freezing cold weather and to buttress the point, it's windy and it's cold, yet you decided to come, and that's a good thing, you know. We have a history of some fair weather friends that will come out when it's pleasant and the conditions are not challenging, but it's very good to have people come out on a cold day. That's a good thing. Ray, does this bend at all? Does it look like it bends?
Yeah, it does.
I don't want to break anything.
what?
Does this bend at all this way?
Yeah, but the bottom screw.
No, then I'll leave it alone. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I don't think I'm going to get to my notes too much anyway. Y'all never let me. I try to keep it organized and read the notes, but very rarely do I ever get to do it. And let me just say from the outset that I'm going to talk about nationalism, and I'll mention some nationalists and what nationalism is, but I want you to think in terms of identifying what a nationalist is and why and how did this happen. You know, what caused, I'm going to give up on these notes right here. It keeps, I think it wants to stay down on the floor, so let me just scrap this. Yeah, just put it there. The thing is, and I often start off with a few questions to get people going, but what I want to do tonight is I want you to identify in certain situations as to who you are. And in so doing, you're in a better position to make the decisions. One of the biggest decisions you'll ever make is a decision to make a stand. You know, the decision to fight is the most important decision you'll ever make. Now, a mother, you know that a mother is fierce when it comes to her children. That does not only exist in human beings, that's across the board.
In nature.
In nature. You know, mothers are fierce fighters. You know, you name the animal, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of animals that would back off from you, but once you threaten their offspring, it's going to be a fight. You know, and I've seen it in nature, in these nature programs, many times. So that's one of the greatest decisions you're ever going to make, that decision to fight. You know, because there are alternatives to fighting, which is to acquiesce. It's, you know, fairly obvious that you can fight or you can acquiesce, and now your life is in the service of whoever's attacking you. Consequently, you might get mercy in that situation. Or you might get some abuse, but not the level of abuse that you might have experienced had you fought valiantly. You might have lost your life. So that's the decision that's going to be made. So from the outset, I'm going to try to see a few things first before I can, before I go any further. From the outset, let me just ask you, what's the letter of the law? When somebody says that's the letter of the law, what are they talking about? Does anybody know? When you say the letter of the law.
They mean the exact nature of what you can do and what you can't do. And
That's it. Absolutely. Anybody else? That's basically it. The letter of the law is what's written in a word. The letter of the law is what's written. Now, what's the spirit of the law?
Not for us.
Well, you're right. You joking, but you're right.
No, I'm not joking.
Okay. It's not for us.
Not for us.
White folks have always benefited from the spirit of the law. Because a judge has wide powers with respect to discretion in a courtroom, and sometimes elected officials in interpreting law will sometimes apply the spirit of the law. Now, with us, they apply the letter of the law. You did something on paper. On paper is saying that, thank you, brother. On paper is saying that you violated something. Consequently, you're going to get hit in all likelihood by the full range of what the law allows you to permit because you violated the letter of the law. Let me just think of an example real quick to give you how, put it this way. A young man from Bensonhurst or Sheepshead Bay can steal a car. Now, that's grand larceny, right? A judge can charge him with, or a district attorney can charge him with driving an unauthorized vehicle. Young black man, 16-year-old, commits the same crime in Bed-Stuy. What is he charged with?
Grand larceny.
Grand larceny. Why? Because that's what the law says. There's no getting around it. You say to the judge, well, he's 16. Is there some alternative program? Something violated the law. You asking me not to execute the law? So that's an example. Now, you know plenty of examples of black men or women that were killed, and technically, or it's a reach, but a police officer might say they were afraid. Whether it's Timothy Stansbury just walking across the roof to grab some CDs, whether it's Whitfield grabbing some milk for the baby on Christmas Day years ago, and so him and his wife can go visit the baby's grandmother. And the police officer said, well, I thought those keys in his hand was a gun. Same thing with the candy barn queens. Same thing with the brush in Bed-Stuy. That's the letter of the law. It's always applied harshly to us. Spirit of the law is extended. In other words, a judge will rationalize that that's not what the law was for, to let a white person go. Here you have stand your ground laws, what they call castle laws. In those laws, a homeowner or a person in those states where it's practiced, and that's over 30 states or 30-something states, they reserve the right not to back down. So if they have a gun on them and a black person is playing loud music, rap music with MFs in it and F-bombs all through it, a white person can say, well, I was afraid. So when that black man stepped out of the car and I heard all this MF and F this and all that stuff, I was afraid. So when he walked towards me, I pulled out on him. And I had to, you know, do what I had to do. I was afraid. My wife was afraid. And that's the spirit of the law. Because law is made to protect them, truthfully, from us. So I want you to fully understand before I go further, the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. Most of the times, black people will be judged by the letter of the law because there's a certain intent. Now, of course, they went the other way when it came to Sandra Bland. Her ex-husband would have you beating her up.
Alexander.
What's that?
Marissa Alexander.
Marissa, what did I say?
Sandra Bland.
Yeah.
Yeah, not saying, yeah. Even though that's another one with you could look at the law, but Melissa Alexander, she was experiencing a terrible beating from her ex-husband, who's a white guy. Now, in this particular account, when he came over again, he had already put her in the hospital. Prior to that, he beat her down again, and in beating her this time, she exercised her not only Second Amendment rights, but her castle law rights. She was in her own domain, her house, and she was in the garage, pulled out a weapon, and instead of putting 2 or 3 rounds in him, which she should have done, could have done and should have done, she shot up in the air. And he took the flight, and he called it in, and they arrested her. Now, you have to decide, was that the letter of the law that wasn't being used? It was the spirit of the law. Because she dared to pull a gun on a white man. That's all she did. And she didn't even shoot him, which she should have. She shot up in the air. You know, several rounds. And, well, you know, at least thank God that the prosecutor, the judge, Angela Spicer, whatever her name is gone now. Black folks got her out of office, you know, the prosecutor in that particular case. But I'm just saying that now, you got to understand, the Constitution is a coercive instrument reflecting power and authority. Remember that the Constitution is coercive. It forces you, it bends you towards its will, whether you like it or not. If a president, a sitting president, if you violate the Constitution in any way, they can impeach you. So, you know, that's why I'm saying it's a coercive instrument, because the Constitution is the law, it's the standard that in America, you always look and question, were your constitutional rights violated? So I'm saying that to say that we have come through slavery and Jim Crow, radical Reconstruction, black codes, all sorts of segregation, fight for integration, and all these things. And in all of these particular cases, we were looking at the Constitution for relief. I'm trying to get to black nationalism, but I want y'all to understand that there's a law, there's policy, there's practice, and then there's the law. Straight, unfettered, the law. Now, the image is important. Our own self-image of who we are shapes everything that we do. I didn't say some of the things that we do. our self-image affects everything that we do. It affects the way we learn, what we believe, whether we believe in God or not, whether we believe in assembling, whether we believe in fighting, to fight back, whether we believe in justice or injustice, whether we are willing to accept the 30 pieces of silver. That's all based on your image of yourself. Now, some of us say, I'm not black, I'm not African, I'm a Muslim. Some people say, look, I'm Christian. Some might tell you, I'm Scorpio, or I'm Pisces, something like that. Some would do that. And some would say that I'm universal. Like they from the cosmos or something. Some would say they're universal. Well, I'm not into all that stuff. I'm universal. Okay. Some would say that, because pain and suffering makes you do some crazy things. And I'm trying to approach black nationalism, but I want you to understand that most places, if you ask 10 or 20 black folks, what are you? You might get about 7, 8, maybe 10 or more answers. You get a couple of answers that will be in agreement, but it's not going to be total agreement almost anywhere you go. Very rarely will you can get 5 people or 10 people to say I'm African. Period. In the story. That's rare. I'm just going to take a quick poll. How many people still use the N-word? Don't worry about it. The camera's on me. It's not on yours. So y'all can be a little honest. Anybody use the N-word in here? Okay.
From time to time.
All right. Okay. Anybody use the B word when referring to our sisters? Anybody? Okay.
Not the sisters.
One.
Guys.
Okay.
Sometimes the guys.
Okay. Anybody use the H word? I think it's H-O-W. Whore?
Honky?
No. Whore? Say that hoe ticked me off. Okay. So, got an honest person. Okay. These are just things you have to remember. I'm talking about self-image. I'm talking about your psyche and how you view the world. It'll affect you. Because, I know if you get around some young men, you hear in a minute, man, F that B. That's common. Nobody's going to look at you strange. You say that, you're a young man, and I'm not talking about a teenager. I'm talking about a grown man in their 20s. Like, man, F that B, man, that's common. And they call each other the N-word all day.
So that's the B
All
word
day
too.
long. They hollered across the street, down the block. Yeah, what's up, my N, You jive in, you ain't sugar, honey, iced tea, that kind of stuff. It will ill affect your self-image. Now, once you are, and so I'm just saying, it's not only the people that say I'm not black or I'm not African. I'm just making a point. Even people that say, I'm black and all that stuff, but your brother's still an N in it. So it's going to affect your image. And your sister's still a B. You ain't fighting for no B. And you ain't fighting for no N's. So you don't feel nothing if you see a brother in the street, something happened to him. You don't run to his aid. Now, if you don't know him, you're going to keep walking. I remember me and my buddy that I grew up with, a brother named Ben. We were in East New York, and we were walking down Sheffield Avenue. and a brother was beating up his, we were young, a brother was beating up his
Girlfriend?
young lady, whether it was his wife, I don't know what it was, and the way he was hitting her, it bothered both of us. So at the same time, and both of us by then, we were over 6 feet, had a little size to us. We figured we can go over there and say, brother, come on, man, because he was hitting her, and you heard the shots from across the street. You heard the actual bam, bam. And I'm like, oh, goodness, you feel it in your stomach, like, oh man, this is ugly. We went across the street, and right when we got close to her, close to them, you know what happened? She started running. She started running, and he ran after her. Now, we lucky that she ran, or we might not even be here. I might not even be here tonight, because when she ran, he took off after her and called her every kind of being in the world, pulled out his gun, knocked her down, pulled out his gun and put it to her head, and said, bitch, if you ever run away from me again, I'll blow your MF head off. And I said, man, me and Ben walked back across the street. and we said, man, he might have, if we tried to stop him, he probably would have put 1 or 2 in us. But he told her, don't you ever run away from me. And that's after beating. So I'm just saying that to say that, what makes you act? The image sees. The image feels. The image acts. Based on your self-image is how you act. Without the proper self-image, you will not act right. You will act out of your mind. If you don't have the right image of yourself. You'll see people in the street, drunk, stumbling, cursing, talking to themselves. You're not going to help that person. Because to you, that person is a derelict, they're no good. That person needs help. Somebody needs to tell that person that, there's a better way. But, the majority of us will keep walking, even if you know them, and not even try to help them out. Because we all need a lifeline sometimes. All of us. The scriptures say, but for the grace of God, go out. That could be any of us. If somebody didn't help us. So, we have to understand that some of us have had some bad days where we did things, and you need somebody to put you on the right course, a moral compass. But self-image, my point that I'm trying to make is that when you see people selling out, whether it's elected officials, whether it's people that are running community-based organizations, or some of the oldest civil rights organizations, it's based on how they view themselves and what they're getting. If they get 30 pieces of silver, you would be crazy to expect them to see the world and fight the way you're willing to fight. They're not jeopardizing hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, depending on who you're talking about, because you want to see justice in any particular case. That's not what they do. Now, and I can't even see my notes, but I want to bring out some things in a position. Now, with African self-image, we have to understand that there are some protocols that has to be followed for you to understand who you are. We used to name things, institutions and things that we built with African names. And this is coming out of slavery. We use African free schools, we name banks and institutions after Africans, or you might have seen the Ethiopian credit this, or the Ethiopian this. You might have seen the term Abyssinian, which is another, saying Ethiopia, the Greek, Greek term for Ethiopia. And even something like AME, when black folks independently started black churches. AME, people say AME so much, we forget what AME means. African Methodist Episcopal. So I'm saying that because what made us retreat from using the term African? How did we get away from that and went to a word that we didn't invent? White folks gave us the word colored. And we went from colored, and then somehow from colored to we felt a little more dignified in being called Negro. I mean, how did that happen? How did this precipitous retreat occur? It's all about your own self-image. How did we develop these white Jesuses that are in churches? I mean, they even in Africa. They even in Africa. How did that happen? So I'm saying that because if you don't know who you are, and even if you think you know who you are, but your image, your real self-image of yourself is dangerous. You're not going to make it because you'll never be the person you should be. You won't realize who you are because of your own self-image of yourself. You'll never be that person. So keep that in mind. Now, there's a word, and I wrote this down so I would remember it, but it's a word that when you retreat from those names, it's called nihilism. Does everybody understand that? That's nihilism, when you retreat from a path that will empower you. When you consciously make that decision to retreat from a path that can possibly empower you, make you better, make the situation better for your family, for all the people around you in the black community, that's nihilism. And somehow we have embraced that so that we find a way. It's cowardly now, but we find a way to use this evasive behavior so that we won't be the people we should be. We find a way to do it, and everybody in the room knows. The brother asked me earlier about the rape case with the National Action Network. And just to reference that, do you think the National Action Network, the people in there, didn't know that their sister was raped by a white man and his white friends? Well, how can they collectively allow it to happen? They weren't going through mass hysteria where somehow Reverend Sharpton controlled their minds. I mean, you had clear evidence. His bottle of Viagra was found at the crime scene. And I'm not suggesting that he was there. I'm not even doing that. He might have been there. He might have left. But that was there. He claimed at the time that this went down, he was about close to a mile away in Midtown, sleeping when it happened. That's what he says. But how does a National Action Network collectively, you have maybe a few hundred people in the room, or 100 people or more in the room, and there's collective silence. that means that nihilism has already occurred, where they have consciously made a decision to not do what elevates a people, not do what they know they're supposed to do, but to sit back consciously and allow it to happen. That's how you retreat from that which you know is the right thing to do, demand justice in that particular case. But you just acquiesce because you know that the principal character in that organization was either a part of it or he's telling you straight up, leave it alone. As his words were, he took a neutral position because he knew both of them. So imagine for me, if you will, a sister I know is being raped right in front of me, and I say, because I know the guy that's raping her, I'm neutral. I know both of them. Neutrality is a position. You all understand that? Neutrality is a position. I know some of us in school they teach neutral is just staying on the fence, not supporting either side. If a sister's being raped and you let it happen, whose side are you on?
You condone it. You condone that.
You on the rapist side. You on the rapist side. Neutrality is a position. You took a position to let him do it. And then you don't say nothing after the fact. You don't take his head. You don't demand justice. And you leave that sister on her own, and subtly it's communicated, look, just cut a deal. No, let's let this go away. Well, whose position were you supporting all along? The rapist. So I'm just saying that to say that we do things consciously or unconsciously because what man is going to walk up to you and admit, I'm a coward? You ever heard a man tell you straight up, I'm a coward?
No.
I've never heard anybody do it. Now, I know there are a lot of cowards around, but I've never heard a man, especially say to a woman, sis, just want you to know before we even do anything, I'm a coward.
It's like I'm a sister.
Why would a man do that? He ain't going to talk himself out of, whatever that could happen by saying, look, sis, I'm a coward. I just want you to know straight up, if something jump off, I'm leaving you, I'm running.
Don't count on me.
Most of us I know, you finished.
Yeah, I don't see you.
You finished.
They lost.
Leave now.
They lost. Yeah, leave now. Yeah, they lost.
They lost. So men don't do that. Men don't tell you they're a coward, I mean, a man might say, look, I'm not a violent guy. And probably none of us in this room are violent. But there's a place for it. Can we agree with that?
Yes.
There's a place for it. But, none of us are probably, I'm sure most people in here are not violent. Their nature's not violent. Or if they were violent, they trying not to be. They trying to live, live and let live. But, there's a place for that. So, I'm just saying that in the National Action Network, they should be ashamed of themselves. Because you let somebody get raped in plain sight and you did nothing about it. So I want to talk about nationalism now because I think we're in the right frame of mind to discuss it. Now, if I say nationalism, what is a nationalist? Obviously, we know the root word is nation. So, a nationalist is just someone whose existence or they're born into that group. I mean, with us now, it's different because we are African, but we're in America. So when you say native, it doesn't exactly apply to us because we're not native to this land, And even though we were here before white folks, so I don't even want to engage you in that kind of argument about who was here first. We was here first. You can go south as far as from here to all the way to Brazil and Colombia and all the places. You can see what we built. We built step pyramids all along the way. So there's no argument there that we was here before the white man. But for these purposes, when I say that you're native or you're national, that just means that there's the devotion to that nation. There's a clear devotion to the actions and principles of that nation. Now that applies to whomever. Now black nationalism is a little bit different, but keep that in mind. If you're devoted to certain principles that will elevate or continue the growth of that nation. Because it's not ominous, it's nothing unworthy about saying that you're a nationalist. The only problem is when you're in the room with somebody that's not. Because if I asked you, do you love yourself? Do you have a positive self-image? Most people are going to say yes. But you know, the proof is when some people said that, you know, they still use the N-word or B-word and other things that we need to get over quickly as we can. That's proof that, you know, we got a lot of work in front of us. Now, does anybody know what the word nimbus means? Nimbus. Somebody know? What?
Nemesis?
No, nimbus. N-I-M-B-U-S. It means a cloud or an aura that surrounds a person or thing. That's nimbus. Some people say, well, if it's around your head, they can call that a halo or your aura. That's your aura. That's nimbus. Now, some people have that. We have great men and women in history that had that. It's almost like when they speak, people listen. Just to jump ahead of myself, I think some of us who had the opportunity to meet and talk with Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad knows and could see his nimbus. It was around him. I mean, and I'm not even talking about him as a member of the New Black Panther Party. He had it when he was in the nation. When he was the minister of Mosque No. 7, and you seen him come into UAM with all those soldiers, you could just see it. That force and power around him was strong. You see what I'm saying? There are certain men in history that have that nimbus, that thing about them, where you could see it just around them. It's that aura. You know, and Malcolm had it. You know, Malcolm had it, and
Marcus Garvey?
oh, Garvey had it. He was magnetic. Even Adam Clayton Powell said he was electric. Is the way he described it. Well, that's the nimbus. That's what's surrounding you, that aura. And it comes out in different ways depending on who the person is. But that's important.
Dr. Clark.
Dr. Clark, in a different way, had it. You know, Dr. Clark in a different way had it. Greatest storyteller out of all the historians, Dr. Clark. Incredible storyteller. I can recall just sitting down with Dr. Clark and in a class, I was critical of Booker T. And inside of maybe 20 minutes, he convinced me that Booker T was all right. And I was dead set against Booker T, man. And he convinced me, you know, and I kind of smiled. I looked at him, so I know what you talk about his nipples. Because after that, I looked at him like, you know, you just conned me, man. You know? but I could dig it, though. I could dig it, you know. So Dr. Clark did have a way with you, and he wanted, you know, and he just kept piling it on the positive aspects of Booker T until I said, okay, man. I said, he all right. I said, that was the only way to get out of it. I said, brother, he's all right. And he just looked back and grinned like, got him. You know, so Dr. Clark's got that. You know, he got away. But he's the greatest storyteller I've ever heard. He's got a story about everything. And Dr. J is similar in that regard, in that he got some stories for you. You know, you got the time, he's going to tell you some stories. He laughed. That story I would not tell.
Yeah, you can't
The one you laughing about that he told us that. That's not even fit for this lecture. He was talking about another professor that did, you know, I can't even, no, I'll leave that alone. But, you know, so that's very important. Some people can affect us that way. The minute they come in the room, you already know that it's on. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because there are certain nationalists, and I'll get into that. But first I want to just say that a nationalist is the realization that we have a common past, present, and future. That's one thing that nationalism slash Pan-Africanism is. And I think most of us can agree that we got a common history, you know, a common present, and a common future if we're going to work together. Or if we don't work together, then we just going to get isolated and picked off.
It's still going to be the same.
So I think we can agree with that. Nobody's disagreeing with that. So I'm going to prove that most of us are nationalists. There ain't no white folks around, and the camera's on me, so y'all going to eventually admit that y'all are nationalist, Pan-Africanists, whether you accept it or not.
I'm a Christian.
Now, another one aspect would be commitment and devotion. You know, as I told you before, that just nationalism is a concept where you are devoted to that nation. So anyone would ask you, well, what nation should we be devoted to? America? You know better. 4 centuries? Should have got the message by now. You're not part of the club. So if I say, you know, it's also a belief in the oneness of the African family, even though we're separated by land. So what is that saying? That means that if the brother is from Jamaica, that's your brother. You don't let the land separate you. If he's in Brazil, and that's way south, it's your brother. Of course, the brothers and sisters that never left the motherland, those are your brothers and sisters. And is that full agreement?
Yes.
Well, y'all are nationalists and y'all Pan-Africanists, because y'all believe we're all one family. Now, I remember I used to work with a sister, and I won't call her name just in case she sees the tape or it's on YouTube. I won't call her name. She told me that her family is from Florida. And I said, well, that's cool, sis. I said, well, where were they? Because she said she wasn't African. So I said, well, where was your family from before they were in Florida? You won't believe what she said. She said they were always in Florida. I said, sis, you don't understand my question. I said, I'm asking you, where were they before they were in Florida. She said, and very stern, and you know, sometimes sisters in law enforcement can get real stern with you.
And they carry
She
guns.
said they were always in Florida. And at that point, I knew to leave it alone. Because she can't countenance the thought of her family's from Africa. Why? It's her image of Africa is so hurtful. So, you know, I saw the same Tarzan movies she saw. I saw Tarzan beating Africans and kicking them in the butt and they running. You know, calling him Bawana Master, calling him Master. You know, he was the only guy that could communicate with animals. He's the only one that had the luxury of swinging on trees. All the other Africans had to walk. He was the only one that could swing on the trees, right? So, and he could command animals and, you know, and yell, and they would all come and assemble. I saw those movies too. I saw the movies that black folks were butlers and shoe shiners and all those movies in the 30s and 40s. You know, saw those movies too. I watched it. I watched TMC. So they play all, is it TMC?
TCM.
TCM, Pop, thank you. TCM. You know, and they play those old movies. I see them. TCM. Turner Classic Movies, yes, TCM. And I, you know, I see those movies. You know, I see movies that, you know, make you put your head down. You know, I can imagine being in that theater, and that then the black folks had to be in the balcony. They couldn't sit down there with the white folks, but they're gonna take your money. They'll put you up in the balcony. And I know how they must have walked out, and that's why if you ever talk to an elderly person that's still around, they will tell you, man, they couldn't wait to see Lena Horne because she didn't play those roles. So, you know, she would play dignified roles, and then later on, you had the Angela Bassett's and different people that's played dignified roles. Sidney Poitier was a person that played dignified roles, but there was an era where you just, you know, you want a job and you want to work. You know, the Stephen Fetchits and the Rochester and all of them. Everybody, these names is familiar to y'all? If y'all watch the movies and you see nobody could do this better than Stephen Fetchit. You know, you talking about the, hey boss, hey master, how we doing today, boss? He was incredible. And they said he was a bright guy in real life. But this was a role he was acting out. And Rochester and all these other guys, they were acting. You know, Rochester was the one that his eyes can get like this. You know, he would be there. The white folks are cool, calm, and collected. His eyes would be like this, and his feet is moving. He said, slow down, feet. I'll tell you when, you know. Things like that. Like, he ain't ready to run yet, but he getting ready to run. Something getting ready to happen. So, that's just pain and suffering that people have. So the sister told me that her family is from Florida and would not negotiate a truce like, well, maybe they from the Caribbean. What about if you're Florida? How about Central America? How about South America? But she's steadfast. Florida, that's it. So, you know, what can you do? So, that's part of image. Let's get specific now, because the time is almost running out. You know, when you look at, first of all, let me say something about First World, because since our sister mentioned Dr. Clark. Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Dr. Jeffries, and I'd say Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, those were like the principal people at First World.
Professor Smalls.
Professor Smalls, I didn't see him at First World a lot, but you know, he was there. But I'm talking about the principal speakers were mainly Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, and then Dr. Jeffries. Now, in terms of energy, why didn't Dr. Ivan Van Sertima have that same energy emitting, you know, like I was talking about the term nimbus, that aura around you, that cloud, that halo, whatever you want to call it. He didn't have that. There's a reason for that. See, he was an intellect, and his teaching was strictly intellectual. He wasn't trying to lift up a race. He wasn't trying to make you leave the room feeling good. It was to teach, strictly to teach. There's a difference. And I'm not saying he didn't teach well, he taught well. But that energy was lacking. But Dr. Ben, man, back then when Dr. Ben laid it down,
That man wake up.
you gotta bow. And he was rough. Rough. As a matter of fact, well, I'll say it in front of the camera. He was rough on Ivan Van Sertima. He said, damn it, stop coming here with white women. He would do that.
His wife was one.
Look, he was jumping on him bad about that. You know, you got, what the hell you doing bringing white women to this black function? You know, Dr. Ben was raw, rugged.
What's wrong with that?
Man, Dr. Ben was something else. You know, so he had, you know, and he would get on you like that. In other words, you know, you here and you part of the, you know, the cipher, you part of the circle. You know, come on now, tighten up, tighten your game up. You know, but Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, and I'll say Dr. Jeffries, they had a different energy. It was to uplift a people that went through slavery, went through segregation, went through the black codes, went through exploitation, went through the fights and murders, went through massacres, to uplift you, to tell you that, you know, you were king and queen, that you're strong and you could do something. Matter of fact, you know, Dr. Ben gave us the Nile Valley. That's his contribution. And I'm not saying that there were not others, because J.E. Rogers and all of them that preceded him, they knew about ancient Kemet and stuff. But if you have to give it to one person that made the whole world know that the Nile Valley and the Nile Valley civilization is ours, it was Dr. Ben. You know, he didn't worry too much about the West of Africa. I'm not saying he didn't know it. He didn't worry about it. He left that to people like Dr. Clark and Dr. Jeffries to teach about the rest of Africa. I won't tell you the word he used, but, you know, about the rest of Africa, but his thing was the Nile Valley, I'll put it that way. And that was his strength. And because the image was very important, because that's where the three major world religions come from, the Nile Valley. And the proof is there, and he laid out the truth, and a whole lot of black clergymen had a problem with that, because he was a race man. He was fighting this battle against white supremacy his way. You know, who was going to lift us up from manifest destiny? The white man's burden, or now white supremacy. They did. And it went from the streets all across the country, what they taught. Now, there were plenty of us who didn't know, and people that would argue with you. In Malcolm's time, there were people that argued with you about that. But we were able to learn at the feet of these master teachers. And that helped, you know, whether you were there or not, their message got to you at some point, and we were able to understand clearly that we contributed something. When you were being called the N-word all day and you think you haven't contributed anything to the world, and now you have black men in front of you telling you you gave civilization to the world. The whole world owes you something because there was no such thing as a written word before you wrote it. There was no such thing as civilization until you invented that. You know, you invented architecture, you invented medicine, you invented even astronomy and all these other things, and knew land mass and was able to measure the size of the world, all this stuff. You know, all comes out of their teaching. So I'm just saying that that's important. Now let me move quickly because if he's collecting that, we get close to that
I got
time.
20.
Okay, let me just say that there were racemen. We know somebody mentioned already Marcus Garvey.
I did.
A black, you did?
Yeah.
Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was an unapologetic raceman. Now, he broadened it what Pan-Africanism was, because he said Africa is your home, you know, Africa,
Yeah.
you know, one aim, one goal, one destiny, things like that. And certainly he connected the whole African world. But Mark Delaney did it before there was a Marcus Garvey, and you had the Henry Highland Garnets that was telling us to organize, let your motto be resistance, resist, 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 and go get your guns.
Yeah.
You know, when you show up back here the next time, I want to see a 45 in your hand. I mean, that's the kind of teaching we was getting. Well, what made us retreat from that, from what Martin Delaney and other ones laid out, and I like that text that you sent me, Sister Keisha, about that during the Civil War, Martin Delaney's sons, because he had three, but you mentioned one that was on that boat, I think, and you mentioned that Frederick Douglass, one of his sons, was on the same boat. They was in the same regiment at that time. And who was the other person?
Denmark Vesey's son.
Denmark Vesey's son. I mean, that's powerful to have some iconic figures, their sons, all in one location, all fighting for one cause. So that's iconic. Now, Marcus Garvey did not come out of a vacuum, like I said. You know, there were people before him that preached it. I think the father of nationalism, Pan-Africanism, is Martin Delaney. But the people that came behind, Cyril Briggs, the African Blood Brotherhood, by these standards today, you'd call him crazy. You know, the way he approached things. And Henry Highland Garnet, you wouldn't want to be caught in a photo with him because he wasn't playing. He's like, resist. You know, white supremacy, fight it on every level. Now, we don't have those types today, not enough. We do have those types, let me say it right. Not enough. But these are the type of black men and women that we had. I mean, to think of, just think of the black women that fought against slavery, and I don't want to mention the movie about, the current movie that's out about Harriet Tubman. It's deplorable, but it beats nothing. In the absence of nothing, you could watch it. It's a novel. It's not. It doesn't reflect her. But you know, you could watch it if you want to. You know, I wouldn't suggest you pay for it, but you know, whatever way you could watch the movie, watch it. Whatever way, you know, whatever you're doing to watch movies, don't pay for that one. Find something else to pay for. But let me just quick, you know, you got Martin Delaney. I mentioned Henry Highland Garnet. Bishop McNeil Turner, awesome. Even took people to Africa. But actually, I'm getting ahead of myself by mentioning them. Because Paul Cuffey did it a century earlier. You know, he took 30 free African Americans and took them to Sierra Leone. So we had some bad brothers now, and you know, Paul Cuffey was no joke, and he took them there. Now you have to remember that during that time, they had the colonization movement, which was trying to take blacks. Just give me 5 minutes, brother. That was trying to take free blacks and take them to Africa, not enslaved ones where their labor was being exploited. Free ones. In other words, everybody from Thomas Jefferson, who was president, and this went all the way to Lincoln, supported the colonization movement. Which means if you're free, get the hell out of it. We can't use you. Get out.
But isn't that how Liberia and Sierra Leone were started?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, no, they were there in existence already.
No, I'm saying.
That's how America got a foothold in Africa, no doubt.
Countries, yeah.
You know, through the colonization movement. But, you know, why, you know, and that created a schism in African leadership, in African American leadership. Because some wanted to stay, some were willing to go, but others said, wait, why do they just want free ones? You know, no, if you want to free everybody, and then let them decide. So it created a schism, a clear schism, but...
Which is so reflected back on the continent as well.
Yeah, well they had a schism there too. You know, which is rightfully understood because America supported the people from here and gave them prestigious jobs and put them in leadership over the indigenous people of Sierra Leone and Liberia. And the capital was renamed after, obviously, you know, President Monroe. So to this day it's called Monroeville. But suffice it to say that these great men, and there are many others, and Charles Hamilton Houston. Oh, goodness, man. Take time. Study this man. This man was just, he wasn't even going to be a lawyer like his father, and I think his mother was a teacher. But when he got mistreated so bad, they almost hung him during World War I, and he was a soldier. You know, they almost hung him, his own white soldiers. That when he came back in the mistreatment that he experienced, throwing him in the caboose, a cold train, no heat, and they treated him so bad, he became a lawyer. When he got back, said he was going to law school, went to Harvard, was tops in his class, and after that, he went to battle and fought Jim Crow and legislation all over the country and did everything. And it wouldn't have happened had they treated him right. But when they treated him wrong, that's what triggered Charles Hamilton Houston to be the person that he became. The greatest lawyer in America, ever. White or black. He was bad. He was just something else. So definitely, you know, that. And William Leo Hansberry. Incredible. Another race man. And he had problems at Harvard. He taught there for years. Harvard eventually got rid of him because he just too black for Harvard. I mean, Howard. Pardon me if I said Harvard, I meant Howard. You know, so we're going to stop in 30 seconds. Just remember Hubert Harrison. Remember Cyril Briggs. You talking about race men? Oh, my goodness. And Monroe Trotter, who got kicked out of the White House because he had it out with Wilson. Yes, the great racist Woodrow Wilson had it out. He got thrown out of the White House. But we're going to stop right there because this time for the break. So please enjoy. They have snacks, warm soup, other snacks for you. So let's take 10 minutes and go in there and enjoy yourself, and we'll come right.
I was in shock
Can you let them
because.
know we started?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna continue with the question and answer, second half. Brother Mike Graves,
Okay, at this time, we will entertain questions. I know Veronica just said something interesting that I told her, you know, you need to bring that to the group. But as I said, you know, we have, and I'm amazed, let me just tell you for the record, I am amazed that given the dexterity of white supremacy, how it engulfed our community back then, how we developed individuals that actually really stood up to this all-encompassing white man. I mean, when you think about it, just think of what Harriet Tubman actually did. You know, they had a price on her head. I don't know what it went to. I forgot. I don't know. But I know in today's dollars, we're talking about a 6-digit number. In today's dollars.
I think it was about 12,000.
And what would that be today, you think?
I don't know.
6 figures like that.
Yeah, 6 figures. Because back then they used to pay people $50 a week.
No, people didn't make 50 then.
No?
You talking about during slavery?
Oh, no.
No, people, you were good. If you
Oh,
made
that's
a dollar a
$1 a
day.
day.
Dollar,
Yep.
If you made $1 a day back then, I'd say even at the turn of this century, if you made $50 a week in 1900, no, you was doing good. $50? Oh no, you probably eventually own your own house. If you're making $50, I mean, you could buy all the groceries you wanted for $5 or $10, $5, $7. You know, you'd have bags of food for your family. So no, if in the early 1900s, 50 was a lot of money, and a little more than that would be, well, you know, you could purchase a car from savings. No, you in the house. No, I'm just gonna say for the record, I believe that Harriet Tubman, it would be $100,000 or more minimum reward on their head.
Probably 6 figures.
Yeah, I say
Probably a million.
yeah, and I'm just saying that this is how outraged they were about her. Now,
Mike, can I just say, but like, with Harriet Tubman, she didn't do this by herself. And,
no, she didn't.
And a lot of struggles that we had and still have as black people, we do get help from whites. They're not all bad.
Well, most of them are bad.
Okay. But that's a true statement.
Remember,
Is that a true statement?
and I'll qualify that if I have to.
Is that a true statement, Mike? That a lot of struggles, and even Underground Railroad was, we needed to help
Okay,
whites.
what the brother's talking about, for the most part, the majority of them, the white people that did that were Quakers.
Right.
Right, all kinds.
Now, it's true, what he's saying, the majority were Quakers, which means they looked at the institution of slavery as a sin. Now, understand what we're talking about here. They religiously, and they were part of the few people that really believed in the Bible. They believed that to enslave a man or woman was against God. So, since you were the victim in that, they would help you to the extent of they did not support that institution. So,
Not because it was wrong.
So, was that?
Not so much because it was wrong.
No, because it was wrong. It was morally wrong. It was a moral question. And they obviously had a moral compass. So Quakers, and I won't say all Quakers, but it seemed that the majority of the white people that helped you across what they call the Underground Railroad, which is secret ways of hiding, supporting slaves in their escape routes, they were Quakers. And they helped you get over that Ohio River, you know, which would lead you to the north. So most of them were Quakers. So remember, you can be a religious person and be against the institution of slavery. That don't mean you love black folks.
Right.
That don't mean you love them. But that means what white people are doing, they recognize that as a wrong. And that they would not support. So most of them were Quakers. And you know, when you say that Harriet Tubman was not alone, of course, you had David Ruggles and so many others. And they had some good brothers all along the way that was free, jeopardizing their freedom to help. You know, and that's important. You had a lot of black men in an organized way who were engaged in something that would have cost them their life had they been caught. So they put their life on the line. So you were correct in saying that it wasn't only Harriet Tubman. The difference in Harriet Tubman and others is that she went south 19 times. They organized so that when they came north, they were able to help. But the distinction was she went down a minimum of 19 times and brought out the number, the conservative number that people use is 300. That she brought back over 300 people. And you know, of course, you know, her timeless statement about, I helped over 300 Africans, but I could have helped more if they knew they were slaves. So that's an indictment against even some slaves, their mentality. They didn't understand that it's worth it to escape to freedom. It's worth it. Yes, sister, you were saying something?
I was going to say that they have a church downtown. I think it's on Pineapple Street.
On what?
A church
On
downtown.
where?
On Pineapple Street.
Okay.
In Brooklyn Heights, actually. I did a tour of like that area.
Oh yeah, they do have one down there.
Yeah, and they like when you go inside, you can actually see all the places where they hid the slaves because they kept all of that.
Yeah, they have some historical sites of the Underground Railroad, and some of them are in Brooklyn.
Oh, I like to see that. Yeah.
And they have
Black
ways.
owned.
Oh yeah,
That sister used to come to
They're trying
UAN.
to take it back now.
You know, no, I think it's already been declared. I
They're
think.
trying to raise half a million.
Landmark.
So if it's now that it's a money thing, but they can't do it based on, you know, that historical legacy, that landmark thing.
Well, they have to
You know.
apply
But
for that
actually-
landmark.
But you know, you still got to pay your bills.
You gotta apply
So-
for that landmark.
It is the historical society on Pierpont said it is a historical site. And
Right.
they acknowledge it. So they plan, you know, it's different rules for different people.
Of course.
Because it is a historical site.
Right, no doubt.
Good question.
It's
That-
money, it's about
you
that
know-
money.
You know what? That's one of the things that's bothering me about today. Now they're talking about all this anti-Semitism and all this Jewish stuff. We've been prosecuted as blacks for hundreds of years, but you never hear a hate. Somebody say that's a hate crime unless he's a Jew or homosexual.
Okay, well here's what. First of all, and I agree with you, that most of the times when you hear hate crime, it's involving more often than not Jewish people, but it also involves white people because blacks it's very difficult. You literally need a white person to say on your behalf that there was anti-black language in the attack, or something that indicates that this was a racist act. You literally have to have a white person to admit to it, because they don't use the hate laws. If you know, you get whether it was what happened in the Stewart case, whether it was Yusef Hawkins and other cases, they don't call these mob attacks hate groups and the like, very rarely. As a matter of fact, it was Director Comey who said what happened in Charleston was not a hate crime. He said it had nothing to do with race, and yet his boss remained silent. All right, who was his boss? Well, no, Sessions wasn't his boss. It was actually Obama. You know. Now his boss was a sister from Brooklyn. Come on, give me a name. Loretta Lynch. Now, do you think that Comey looked at Loretta Lynch as his boss?
No.
No way. Are you kidding? He running the FBI. Obama goes from what's the brother from Queens? Eric Holder goes from Eric Holder to Loretta Lynch, and Comey's gonna look at that as his boss. Now, this goes back to what I talked about earlier. Letter of the law. What does the letter of the law say? The Attorney General is over the FBI. Do you think for a moment that Comey, who was running the FBI by that time, let's say 10 years, looks at a fat, overweight black woman as his boss that was appointed to a position? He said, not Obama, not Loretta Lynch, he said, this is not a hate crime. In other words, let the state handle it. He said it. And I said to myself, it's going to be a reply. There's no way Obama sitting in that White House does not have to run again. It's going to allow that.
That's why I'm getting $500 at the end of this year.
He allowed it. I mean, I said, are you kidding me? He said it. So Charleston, 9 people being killed, including Reverend Pickney, who was a state assembly person, was killed. It was not a hate crime. But he targeted an historical church that goes back to slave insurrections, were organized in that church. And the white guy who perpetrated that crime knew that. What did he drive, 200 miles or something, they said? To go to that church specifically and to kill people in the church. And Comey said it's not a hate crime.
It wouldn't have happened in Martin and Lady's church.
Well, I'm saying that would have happened in almost any black church. Let's be clear. First of all, black churches historically does not do any searching. I don't even think that you see magnetometers set up in any church. You know, so you don't see metal detectors. The only ones who who implement some type of check procedures are the nation, for the most part. Nation Islam has always had a check procedure going back to the early 1930s. And to this day, they check everybody. As a matter of fact, they check each other. They even search each other. So you could be in the nation 10, 20, 30 years, they search you. And if you've been around that long, you understand the procedure, so you go in there and take it, you know, it's no big deal. But now, go ahead, because I was going to mention what Veronica said to me during the break, but I'll wait till she comes back and mention it. But you know, if you have a question, you could definitely put it to the floor.
Yours says, she said, right after that, once the investigation was concluded, or the commission was concluded that the United States Police Department in urban areas are infested with racism,
Yes.
hate groups, she said, out of her mouth, there's nothing we can do about it. It's too big of a feat.
Okay. She said a few things about that. From the outset, it was her predecessor, Eric Holder, had made it legal that every police department has to report at the end of the year their homicides to the federal government, to specifically the FBI, which means at the end of the year, they want to, all the homicides that have been perpetrated by the police departments, every individual police agency reported, and in that, a breakdown of race. That was Eric Holder that did that. She comes in, and she spoke before a large body of police officers and sheriffs and the like. And she called that minutia. She said, don't worry about that minutia.
Yeah.
Like, who are you to change the law? The hell are you? That's why I'm not one of those that, oh, no, we got to get a sister in. You get a sister in. That's why you see all these police departments, especially in the South. Who's the chief now? And most of them?
Black women
Black women.
Yeah.
still continuing to say.
Because they are controlled by white men.
Right.
Yeah.
And they become the spokespersons. And that's why Amber Geiger and all of them have been able to do what they do in Dallas and all these places. You
Get
know.
their hair done while they're on the stand.
Well, you know.
Get hugs at the end of the party.
Yeah, all of that stuff. And
That's
that's
why I got
actually, it's just a shame. I mean, how do you're the Attorney General, which means you're the #1 law enforcement person in the country.
Well,
And you call the reporting of black deaths at the hands of police officers, you characterize that as minutia? I mean, what's minutia? Garbage, right? Junk.
Wow.
Told every police agency in America, don't worry about it, that minutia. Man, I mean, you need to put her in a room with, that'd be a good one.
With the mothers of all the boys that were killed by cops.
Because we have
About that.
we have to define things as it is. Now, as I was talking about earlier, self-image, and what I was just trying to say is that you have to be able to identify things as they are, not as you want them to be. Now, in the Serengeti, where you see lions, I'm not talking about Bronx Zoo lions. I'm talking about real lions that ain't drugged up and half the day they just sleeping all drowsy and stuff. I'm talking about them. It identifies, it's a predator, a cold-blooded killer, but it's a predator. I don't even want to call it a killer. That's part of its survival. So the various predators in the Serengeti, they know who the boss is, who's afraid of who backs off and avoids that particular animal. So you're not gonna make a mistake if you are small or frail. There are deers, there are different types of bulls and wildebeest and stuff. You get caught out of pocket, you're the lion's dinner. Because they don't play with stuff. Some of us do not identify traitors, race traitors, as what they really are. Some people get into that male thing, or especially a female thing where, you got to unite with your sister. You got to be good. She got all that support to be Attorney General from sororities and fraternities. That's how that was part of the process of her being confirmed. Loretta Lynch. And that's what she does. So, how do you fight to get accurate reports on how many people are being killed, what's their age, what color they are, and then you specify what were the conditions. And she calls that minutia. Race traitor. Race traitor. Her claim...
Nobody called out on me either, right?
Did you hear anybody call that?
Nobody
Please.
said
Did the Civilians Complaint Review Board come up in that same year?
That was way after.
No, they had a civilian complaint.
They still do. It's still in existence.
It is-
But the majority of the Civilian Complaint Review Board are retired police officers.
But that
That's true.
wasn't the case when it was.
So I'm the guy to explain that one, do I?
No.
Okay.
When it was first created, that wasn't the case.
Okay. Yes, brother.
Question. I didn't read it in detail, but I saw a clip where the Attorney General Barr is telling the white Jewish community that he's going to protect them from anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Can anybody, because I didn't read it, did anybody tell me who he identified in the United States as being anti-Semitic that he's going to protect them from? No, because you see, I remember when he was in America,
Yeah.
white people, no niggers, no dogs, and no Jews. So I remember the white people
Right.
being against the Jews. Now, did he identify who he's has he identified, it's a question to the group, has he identified who these white Jews have to be, who's the new anti-Semite in the United States
We
that
are.
he said?
No.
Did he identify
Here's
it?
what. Here's what.
You don't have to.
No, I mean, I'm
Here's
just,
what.
see if
They had.
did he identify?
Of course, he can't identify because it's cast for the friendly ghost. It does not. First of all, and I'm not going to say that there's no such thing as anti-Semitism, but does it play out with physically harming Jews?
Nope.
It don't.
But
We're talking about
Emotional.
if you see kids write a symbol on a wall. That's considered anti-Semitic if you draw a swastika on a wall, or especially if you vandalize anyway a Jewish synagogue.
Or right now, say
But-
Abraham against Israel.
And but here's what, you have to remember, well, if you do anything against Israel, it's called anti-Semitic. They're not Semitic people.
It's actually against
know,
the federal
Who
government.
is this?
Did he identify?
what he said,
Let me just ask you a question, what is,
Yeah, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm asking
I'll ask you Socratically, you know.
Right.
What,
So it's-
what's a Semite?
A Semite is one.
Before
that
you
has
before you go further,
dual cult.
look at what's the root word of Semitic?
Two. Semite.
Semite. Who said that?
Two is Semite.
Semite.
Right.
What does Semite mean?
Not
Half.
Half.
Okay.
So you're answering your own question. So to be a Semite means, first of all, it actually speaks to a language. A language that's spoken in between Africa and Asia. Those are Semitic languages.
Okay.
So they're not Semites. They're from Europe. They go
actually, yeah, those are Europeans. Those are not
they're
Jews.
European.
Those are not true
The
Jews.
people that are in Israel now, they go back to the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea. That's how far away they are. They're not the people of the book. So anti-Semitism, put it this way, Brooklyn Tech, they had a swastika or something that they said was anti-Semitic at Brooklyn Tech. They also had something about N-words go home. Right? Which ones did the police department mention they're going after? The one that was anti-Semitic. They straight up,
It's just.
they don't worry about, N-word go home, because they say it too. Now, just to show you, and we're gonna get to question. Just let me just say
Dr.
this.
Lewis.
To just remember, that's how white folks talk. Malcolm in that debate with that, about 3 professors, and they were all going at him, and Malcolm was debating it. At one point, he started calling one of the doctors an expert on black people and an expert on gangs. And so when the brother said something to the effect about, well, Malcolm, I don't have a doctorate on gangs. He said, well, you act like the way you talk about black people. And then he went on to say to another professor who was coming at him, one of them Ivy League professors, coming at him hard during the debate, and he asked him, he said, do you know what white people call black PhDs? And the person said, what? And he said, nigger. And shut him up. In other words, you fighting for them so hard, you know, I need you to understand.
Right.
So I'm saying that to say that when two commentators, and I'll do this real quickly, two commentators spoke about Kobe Bryant. One said the Los Angeles niggers. I don't know how you get that unless that's inside of you. If that's the way you talk about us, ad nauseum, that's the way you talk about us, it's gonna come out the way you talk around white people, even though you're a professional journalist and you're reporting the news. So, Allison, whatever her name is, called it Morris? Allison Morris, she called it, she said, the Los Angeles niggers, and then she said, denied saying it. She denied saying the word, the N-word. She denied it, and then she said, oh, well, what really happened was, I combined the words, you know, New York Knicks with the Lakers, and it came out Nakers. What does that have to do with niggas? And then she said, and then the other one, Ramona Shelburne, she said, she was talking about Kobe's teammates, and she said, cellmates. Not teammates, she called them cellmates.
Right.
If Kobe's teammates are cellmates, what does that make Kobe?
Prisoner.
An inmate. So, with his $400 million and his Oscar, you know, award and all the great things that Kobe has done, he's an N-word to them. He's nothing.
I just want to see if somebody can answer the question because I didn't read it. When the Attorney General is stating to these people who they identify as Jews, Semites, I assume it's white.
Yeah.
Did he or anyone define
He never defined
what human beings are here in the United States who are anti-Semitic? Did he ever say who?
No, he did not identify any particular group, but earlier it was Bob that with Comey that had developed that black identity extremist thing, the BIE. It was Bob that wrote out the whole playbook on black, on that, the black, what you call them?
What he said,
extreme black identity extremists.
I picked that up in that little small giveaway. He said, due to the recent attacks,
Right.
which was on that
Cuomo
attack,
and
that
the
they was
president.
basing it on that.
So what he's trying to say is he's trying to imply, the way they do it, that is the black people who in this country who are anti-Semitic. So that way that can take away all of the history of anti-Semitism here when we had no niggas, no Jews, and no dogs. So they want to wipe that out your mind and say, let's target the black. So I just want
Yeah, no, that's good.
No, because
and somebody over here had mentioned that anti-Semitism includes, if you say something about Israel, I think somebody over here said it. If you say something about Israel, you are now classified as anti-Semitic. And I would say to you, can you say that about Egypt? You can say something about Egypt. You can talk about Nigeria. Why can't you talk about Israel?
That's right.
The other question I want to ask is, can anybody comment on Trump signing the executive order right after that incident stating
Yeah, about Israel.
any anti-Semitism on the college campus, we will take your money away.
Yep,
Did anybody,
yeah,
can you
I saw
explain
it,
that?
actually saw it.
What does it mean?
Yeah, I would say that some of it might be word noise, and some of that can be applied, obviously, if you're caught engaging in that. But I'm just saying for the record, it's more word noise because we're not talking about actually attacks. Look, Sandra Bland is dead. Rekoya Boyd is dead. You know, John Botham is dead. When us, it's death. But if I asked y'all right now how many Jews were killed in the Holocaust, y'all don't know the number that they always say.
7 million.
6. But if I said, well, how many black people were killed?
Yeah.
250,000.
No.
That's a conservative number, but at least that's a number in the ballpark. 250 million.
Million, yeah.
Yeah, not thousand. She would say million.
But
So if that's the most conservative number is 100 million, but people that look at it more closely says more like 250 to 300 million over the last 4 centuries. And you know, as Dr. Collins said, his number was closer to 600 million, but 250, 300 million is not crazy because Leopold did 10, 15 million by himself. You know, in the Congo, so.
yeah, but the white supremacists, even
I
in Charlottesville, they used to say the Jews will not replace us. That was the biggest chant they were saying. Jews will not replace us in Charlottesville when they had that.
Yeah, but that's
See,
rhetoric.
that's what's happening on these college campuses. As I mentioned to y'all before, that they are rooting them out, and they are attacking them, and they are beating them. Because they feel that they are not on the right side, which is white aggression. And if you're not on the right side, you're going to beat the hell out of you. And that's what happened in Charlottesville. It wasn't against us. It was against them.
Well, there were opposing forces there, and sometimes when you see white folks having a dichotomy with each other, it's better to stay out of it. All right? Don't fight their battles for them.
They all on white.
So if white people are fighting with each other because one side is forcing the other side to unite with them
That's right.
and saying you ain't doing this right, and they're going to try to impose their will on the other side, what are you doing there? Stay out of it. But go ahead, Rajin, because your hands have been up for a while.
Well, it's interesting with this whole Jew thing because Chris Rock said, you know, black people hate Jews and white people, and then he said, yeah, black people don't have time to be dicing white people up in categories. Black people hate white people.
That's a luxury.
And so for the most part, why do we as a community constantly go after Jews and
Well, I don't know why we
whites as a
mentioned it during a black nationalist conversation, but y'all involved in that because y'all trying to protect it. That's that image in us. We dealing with Jews.
No, you didn't-
And all, you know,
You didn't let me
Keisha
finish my
just said
question.
250 million and we talking about Jews. But go ahead.
Right, so we constantly talk about the Jews this and the Jews that and the Jews that. And then we talk about white people this and white people that. And it's like, it's the same group of people that are constantly oppressing on a global level. So what is this whole thing about Jews and whites? Why are we in that space? And the second question is, you asked if you expected a response from President Obama as well as the Attorney General. Why would you expect a response from a positive response from a system that has never been positive to you? I mean, whether it's Eric Holder, President Obama, or any
I'll
of
tell you
these-
why. I'll tell you why. Because he saw a violation of the law. he is supposed to protect the interests of all the people.
It's the system does
So
not.
I know what you're saying, I know what you're saying, but
Why
I'm
do
just
you
saying,
expect that?
how does he allow his hand-picked Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, to call the suffering of black people minutia?
How do you not understand that?
I'm not saying I don't understand it, because I know what she is. She's a race traitor. No good, well, I won't, get into it, but in other words, what I said about the Serengeti is that in life and death situations, every animal identifies who's who. See, we don't identify who's who. If we was identifying who's who, we would know who's for us, who's against us, who you would get into the foxhole with, who you would never on your worst day. Why would somebody go to certain leaders we have, Sharpton, Jesse, and so many others, for justice? Why would they? When they cherry pick what they will support, what they wouldn't. NAACP ain't supported black folks in how long? Yeah, they got a good history, but how long is that history? 70, 80 years ago? Now, they pick and choose. How could the NAACP, initially the upstate chapter, support Tawana Brawley and get a check for $25,000 and drop Tawana Brawley like a hot potato? I mean, they pick and choose. I mean, that's the thing. Now,
Is that the money Hazel Dukes bought the flowers with?
no, I don't know. I doubt it. That's some expensive flowers for $25,000. But that's a mere pittance to allow a 15-year-old girl to be raped, and you say I'm out. That's disgusting. Now, what Veronica was saying earlier is that she was at Masjid Atapa, which is right there on Bedford in Fulton, and she was saying that that the brothers over there, they don't consider themselves African. I think she said something along those lines, or black. They consider themselves Muslims. And this is what I said to you earlier. I told you earlier when I said, one quote you hear is, I'm not black, I'm Muslim.
It's always funny that they say
So
that.
people think that somehow Muslims are more conscious than Christians. And they call Christianity a slave religion. If Christianity is a slave religion, what the hell is Islam? Who's been more brutal?
Right?
Who's been more brutal?
Both.
I mean, they still to this day sell black folks. So I don't see how you think one is revolutionary and then the other one is a sellout.
See,
Well, look at our history.
No.
If you look at our history, you're going to see the black church was a helpmate for the longest. They had to turn it around, which goes back to image. For the longest, the black church didn't grow up with sugar daddies and all that stuff, and all these pimps and all this stuff. I mean, the black church was where you went if you needed a winter coat, if your family needed a meal, or if the Ku Klux Klan was coming to your house that night, similar to an Emmett Till type situation, you got the brotherhood. I mean, that's what Dr. Sweet did in the case in Detroit in 1925 when white folks were coming to remove him from that house because he was in an all-white neighborhood, and he was a medical doctor. When he bought the house, they said they was coming that night. They was outside. They had a line of police outside for a while, and he had the brotherhood, the church brotherhood there, and they had their stuff. And when they started shooting at them, they shot back. Killed one of them white folks. Of course, they charged him with it. It wasn't self-defense, even though you in your own home, they charged him. But I'm just saying, that's what the black church used to be. Yes.
What a lot of African Americans are stating that they came before Columbus that they are Native Americans, that the land masses broke up and that they were always native. The natives were black. Most people think the native people were white as well, but the native people were black. So,
Right.
you know,
But it wasn't,
some are not separating and saying, not only am I Muslim, they're just saying they're not African.
what she's
I
saying
feel
is,
like Dr. Ben would say,
yeah.
you know.
Well, what she's actually talking about is, you would call it Pangea.
I can't be alive.
Pangea, the whole concept that the earth at one time was all one landmass. And you could see that there was a split, plate tectonics, that caused shifts and land masses actually broke up and separated. That's why you have animals spread out all over the country, but the black man actually traveled. It wasn't like during the process of Pangea that black folks ended up on this side of the land. They traveled. They traveled. And
But wasn't it, I heard you say, oh, I just left. Go ahead, sorry.
okay. Yes, Rob.
Okay, just one last thing, the difference between, Jews and white people is the religion they practice. They all white.
Dr. Ben,
Well, you're right.
the original.
Well, they're all European.
Okay, they're European. Okay, the question, yeah. That's just my statement. The question I have is that, do we need to be militant in our fight for justice or
Do we need to be militant?
right, do we need to be filled with, or like?
What I said earlier
What do you
was,
feel about it?
yeah, what I said.
I said militant.
Yeah, well, what I was saying
Be vigilant is
earlier
good.
was we somehow apply nihilism to our freedom struggle. So we're going to reject the whole process that leads us towards liberation. If the white man finds it displeasing,
Right.
we're not going to do it. We only want to do things that white folks approve of.
Right.
No, what man is going to give you
no one gives
the
us power.
strategy to uproot him and to destroy him? They're not going to give you the keys to destroy him and come into the big house.
No
and
one
make
gives
it
you
yours.
power. You have
So,
to take it.
Yeah, you know, as Frederick Douglass said, power conceives nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. So, you know, in that regard, they have controlled our behavior, unfortunately, through our religious leaders now, and political leaders, not just religion. I ain't beating up religion. Also our political leaders. So, in the time, even though you had the Henry Allen Garnetts, Bishop McNeil Turner, Nat Turner was a preacher, you had so many, Gabriel Prosson and others, that had no problem with the militant approach because it's going to be effective. They juxtapose to this day Dr. King, Malcolm, and people like that. And Dr. King would always preach against violence as if Mahatma Gandhi did whatever he did by being peaceful. Because you have to remember that Gandhi might have preached the principles of peace, but that peace did not extend to those 10 million behind him. So the alternative was either deal with those militant Indians or deal with Gandhi. They chose to deal with Gandhi. So whatever concessions were achieved came through Gandhi. And this is why in the traditional civil rights movement, all the victories that we got was given to the civil rights leaders, not the Black Power movement.
Right.
Even though it would have been a different world without RAM, without the Nation of Islam, without the Black Panther Party, Republic of New Africa, or even going back to Cyril Briggs and the African Brotherhood and the Garveys of the world.
Chicago 6?
They made it a point to never give the victories or be there at the signing of an amendment or an act, Civil Rights Act, Voters' Rights Act, Housing Act. You have civil rights leaders, because image is important. So you got to have the Dr. Kings and people like that, the Abernathys and others there, because you don't want to give the image that you gave up something to the Black Panther Party. Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale. Can you imagine them at a signing of some civil rights or human rights legislation? That image will go across the world. So white people are basically telling you, and to this day, they beat you up with, that's not the way Dr. King would do things. That's why on his birthday, you're inundated with Dr. King, and that's why a few days from now, when Black History Month starts, who's gonna be the central figure?
King.
Dr. King. When this past Black History Month, I heard more about Dr. King than about anybody else. I'm like, wait, Dr. King, there were people that was here before Dr. King. Why is all Black History Month a celebration of Dr. King?
Not Malcolm X, not Marcus Garvey, not Nat Turner.
No, none of that. All Dr. King. Yes.
And to your point, have you, anyone in this room, raise a hand, seen the picture of Dr. Martin Luther King with Elijah Muhammad and his wife? Anyone in here?
Yeah.
I know you saw it, but I'm asking anyone else seen that picture. See, they don't talk about that Dr. King. And him and Elijah Muhammad actually decided that they would do the hunger campaign together. And he said he felt that he moved his people into a burning building because they should have had economic rights.
Well, here's
and
what.
he was talking about the church as well.
Here's what, in terms of image, people really look at that picture of Dr. King.
But they cut his wife out of that picture.
Yeah, well, that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
More than one occasion.
It doesn't matter.
At his house.
But the thing is.
Oh, image is important.
Yeah, image is important, but I'm just saying that that's the image that they use after Malcolm. That picture everybody sees in Washington, D.C. of Malcolm. Malcolm made it a point to have people take that picture. Dr. King was trying to avoid that picture. He didn't want to be in that same thing, especially at the height of the things he was doing with Malcolm. That just happened. Now you have to understand that the meeting with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that was a real meeting of the minds. But the one with Malcolm, no, that was not a meeting of the minds. Now,
I'm going to disagree.
Sure, go right ahead.
The only reason, no, I just became familiar with it as well, but not only did they had met in the airport and shared a laugh. Dr. King had went to Africa in 1956, 57, 58.
Ghana.
He went to Ghana. He was an invited guest of Kwame Nkrumah. So when he started doing that, the last 2 years, if you listen to his speeches, those 3 speeches, which I got from your debate at Clark House.
Okay.
So let me refresh your memory.
Okay.
Now,
Look,
now the last 2 years,
I was in a debate against somebody,
Malcolm,
and I had to uphold Dr. King.
Right.
Full disclosure.
And
I was in a debate. I had to, Dr. McIntosh said to me, called me and said, Michael, I'm trying to find somebody, because they juxtaposing, icons. And, it was time for Dr. King and Malcolm. And he said, I got somebody that's going to do Malcolm, but I can't find somebody to do Dr. King. So she's trying to use my own stuff on. So I said, look.
I'm giving you access, but also let me add to it.
Go ahead.
The last 2 years, and if you listen to Dr. King's last 3 speeches, you'll think it's Malcolm. And after they firebombed Malcolm's house with his children, he started to sound like Dr. King. He started calling.
Well, let's not say that about Malcolm.
Yeah, well, I will say it because it's true. And you
If
can
anybody
listen to-
got to upgrade, Dr. King had to upgrade.
And I'm gonna ask, how many books did Dr. King write?
Oh, I don't know.
How many?
He wrote a lot of books.
You know, and most
He
people.
wrote a lot of books.
I myself did not know, and if you read some of those books,
But here's what.
economics and so forth, he
constantly.
he turned into Malcolm.
I know. Well, I wish he would have, but he didn't.
No, you have to read the book.
Well,
The books. Follow them. Chaos to Community.
He deplored and kept speaking against violence and militancy, and we needed to be militant. You have to remember that it was, truth be told, see, I know that because I debated for him, it was Kwame Ture that convinced Dr. King that you keep talking about we got to do things non-violently. He said, why don't you mention Vietnam? Said, you talking about, he said, first of all that money that should be going towards the black community are being used to fight this war in Vietnam. Speak out against that and beat them up all night. All night. By the morning time, do you know what Dr. King said to Kwame Ture? You know, brother, you right. And that's why he made that speech. And that speech cost him his life.
Last 3.
That's what he did at Riverside. He made that speech. So I'm just saying that to
White
say.
folks and black folks started.
Let me give you one example quickly.
Okay, we got 3 more minutes. 3 minutes, okay.
Okay, let me just say quickly.
Church
This is just an example, and I've used it before with y'all. This is my favorite, Martin Delaney. Sir, my home is my castle. This is a response to the Dred Scott decision. All right? Sir, my house is my castle. If any man approaches that house in search of a runaway slave, I care not who he may be, whether constable or sheriff, magistrate, or even a judge at the Supreme Court. If he crosses my threshold of my door, and I don't lay him a lifeless corpse at my feet, I hope the grave may refuse my body a resting place. And righteous heaven, my spirit, a home. He cannot enter my house and both of us live. That's Martin Delaney. Now that sounds like something that Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad would have said or Malcolm would have said. This is the strength we had. So that's a little bit different from Dr. King saying, oh, no matter what they do, you know, we should not become so low as to hate. You know,
turn the other cheek.
That was his speech the last 2 years.
So in any event,
All right, ladies and gentlemen, give Brother Mike a big hand.
Thank you, Mike.
He will be here in 2 weeks, kicking off
give a date. Give a date.
Black History Month. We're bringing in from African Echoes, from Newark, Brother Truss. Brother Truss, and that would be February the 12th. Bring a friend. We want to pack the house with Brother Truss. I want to thank Mike.
We gonna have lentil soup?
I'm on the proud to get the lentil soup.
Black history every day for me.
Dr. King and all the freedom fighters that tried their best due to the circumstances, as Dr. Clark always said. A lot of people say things, but due to the circumstances that they was in at that time, this is what they did. A lot of people say, well, you know, if it was me back then, he probably would have did the same goddamn thing everybody else would have been hanging from a goddamn rope. So they served their purpose well, and due to the circumstances at the time, everybody do their part and still try, but they are warriors. They gave up their life, you know, when they really didn't have to. They offered Malcolm X $500,000, according to Dr. John Henry Clark, to go to left field. And he turned it down.
Refused it.
Dr. King did not want to go the route he went. He was pushed into it by the powers that be. He really didn't want to go that route.
He took it and he still did follow you.
He was killed, murdered.
That's right. Both of them.
So no matter what, he gave his life. So, and at that time, they was kicking ass and taking names.
They still are.
They
They
asked
still are,
right
but back then,
Absolutely are.
back then, they still doing it today, but they was kicking ass and taking names back then as they doing today. So they both was warriors, just like Mackie and all that shit gave up. So trust to be here, kicking off Black History Month. Please bring people and give yourself a